Let's see how far you can run now.
I'm the guy who fixes your Wi-Fi and gets cheated on by his wife's Fitbit. Name's Tom Kessler, 39 years old. And until 3 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was explaining to clients why turning it off and on again actually works. Turns out some things can't be fixed that easily, like finding your wife, Julia, screwing her personal trainer in your own garage, right next to the '67 Mustang you've been restoring for 5 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the real problem. Julia's brother, Danny. Danny Hartwell moved in with us 6 months ago after his third DUI cost him his apartment, his job, and what little dignity he had left. Julia insisted we help family, and like an idiot, I agreed. Danny was supposed to stay 2 weeks. 2 weeks became 2 months, then 4, then permanent. Tom, you're being unreasonable, Julia said that Tuesday morning, standing in our kitchen wearing her workout clothes. At 7 a.m. for her 9 a.m. session with Dwayne Harper, her personal trainer. Danny's family. Danny's a 34-year-old man-child who ate our leftover pizza at 3 a.m. and left the box on the coffee table, I replied, staring at my laptop screen. Again. Danny shuffled into the kitchen wearing my Northwestern University t-shirt and boxer shorts that had seen better decades. Morning, folks. Julia, you got any of that fancy protein powder left? It's in the pantry, she said sweetly, the same tone she used to use with me. Cool. Tom, can you spot me $20? I'm meeting some buddies for lunch. I looked up from my work. What buddies? The ones from the unemployment office? Julia shot me a warning look. Tom, what? It's a legitimate question. Danny, you've been living here rent-free for 6 months. You eat our food, use our utilities, and somehow my Northwestern shirt migrated to your wardrobe. The least you could do is contribute something. Danny grabbed the protein powder and shrugged. Hey man, I'm between opportunities right now. Julia gets it. Julia gets a lot of things I apparently don't, I muttered. That's when I noticed Julia's phone buzzing on the counter. The screen lit up with a text from D with a fire emoji next to it. The preview read, "Can't wait for our private session today. Bring that energy from yesterday." Julia snatched the phone before I could read more. Who's D? I asked. Dwayne, my trainer, you know that? Since when do trainers send fire emojis? Since you became paranoid about everything. She grabbed her gym bag and headed for the door. I'll be back around noon. After she left, Danny made himself comfortable at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal that cost more per ounce than my hourly rate. You know, he said between spoonfuls, you're pretty lucky Julia puts up with your attitude. My attitude? Yeah, man. You're always on her case about something. The gym, her friends, money. She's just trying to stay healthy and happy. I closed my laptop and really looked at Danny for the first time in weeks. Stubble that had graduated to a full beard, my t-shirt stretched over a beer gut, crumbs in that beard from whatever he'd eaten for midnight snack. Danny, let me ask you something. When you were married to Cindy before she left you, did you contribute anything to the household? That's different. Cindy was what? Unreasonable for expecting her husband to have a job? To pay bills? To not drink their rent money? Danny's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. You don't know what you're talking about. I know Cindy called Julia crying because you spent their mortgage payment at Murphy's Tavern. I know she begged you to get help and you told her she was nagging. I know she finally gave up and moved back with her parents because she couldn't watch you destroy yourself anymore. That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen, Danny? He put down his spoon and leaned back in his chair, my chair at my table in my kitchen. Look, Tom, I get that you're stressed about money and Julia and whatever, but don't take it out on me. I'm going through a rough patch. 6 months isn't a rough patch. It's a lifestyle choice. Whatever, man. At least I don't spy on my wife's text messages. That hit different because it was true. I had been paying more attention to Julia's phone lately. The late workouts, the secretive conversations, the way she'd changed her passcode from our anniversary date to something I didn't know. I'm not spying, I said. I'm observing. Same thing. No, it's not. Spying implies I'm looking for something that isn't there. Observing means I'm paying attention to what is there. Danny laughed and went back to his cereal. You're paranoid, dude. Julia's just trying to get in shape. Nothing wrong with that. But there was something wrong with it, and it took me 3 more weeks to figure out what. The first clue came from our joint bank account. Julia had always been careful with money, almost obsessive about tracking expenses. So when I saw a $350 charge at the Riverside Boutique Hotel on a Tuesday night, the same Tuesday she'd claimed to work late on quarterly reports, I knew something was off. The second clue was Ray Martinez, my buddy who bartends at Murphy's Tavern. Ray's been married 3 times, divorced twice, and currently separated, so he's basically a PhD in relationship dysfunction. "Tommy boy," he said when I stopped by after work that Friday, "you look like someone stole your lunch money and kicked your dog." Julia's acting weird. Weird how? Like, hiding bodies weird or just regular marriage weird? She's secretive about her phone working out constantly, and there was this hotel charge I can't explain. Ray poured me a beer without asking what I wanted. Hotel charge? $3.50 at the Riverside, same night she claimed to be working late. Ouch. Ray wiped down the bar with the kind of focus that meant he was thinking. "You ask her about it?" She said it was a work thing. Client meeting. At the Riverside. That place is strictly for people who want privacy, if you know what I mean. I knew what he meant. The Riverside Boutique Hotel was where people went when they didn't want to be seen. It was clean, discreet, and asked no questions as long as you paid cash. "Maybe it's nothing," I said. "Maybe," Ray agreed. "Or maybe you need to get receipts instead of suspicions." "What kind of receipts?" "The kind that prove what's happening instead of what you think is happening." "You want another beer?" I shook my head. "I should get home." "To what? Danny eating your food and Julia texting her trainer?" "How did you—" "Because you told me about Danny 3 weeks ago, and you just told me about Julia's phone. I'm a bartender, Tommy. I connect dots for a living." When I got home, Danny was on my couch watching my Netflix on my TV, surrounded by empty beer bottles and pizza boxes. Julia was in the shower singing something I didn't recognize. "Hey, Tom!" Danny called out. "Julia ordered pizza. I saved you a couple slices." I looked at the boxes. Both were empty except for crusts and grease stains. "Where are the slices you saved me?" "Oh, I ate those too. But I thought about saving them." That's when I decided Ray was right about getting receipts. The next morning, Saturday, I told Julia I had a client emergency and would be out most of the day. She seemed relieved, which should have been my first warning. "Take your time," she said. "I might hit the gym later, then maybe grab lunch with Megan." Megan was Julia's best friend and biggest enabler. Whatever Julia was doing, Megan knew about it. Instead of driving to my fake client emergency, I parked across the street from our house and waited. At 10:30, Danny left wearing my Northwestern shirt again, probably heading to whatever bar would serve him lunch. At 11, Julia came out wearing workout clothes that looked more expensive than I remembered. She drove to the gym, but instead of going inside, she sat in her car for 10 minutes checking her phone. Then Dwayne Harper came out of the gym and walked over to her car. They talked through her window for a few minutes, and then she followed him to his truck. I followed them both to a house I didn't recognize in a neighborhood I'd never seen Julia visit. They went inside together. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching that house, feeling something die inside my chest. When they came out, Julia's hair was different, messier, and Dwayne had his arm around her waist until they reached their cars. That's when I started planning. The thing about being an IT consultant is that you learn to think systematically. You identify the problem, gather data, analyze the situation, and implement a solution. Julia was cheating on me with her personal trainer while her unemployed brother lived in my house and ate my food. That was the problem. The data was easy enough to gather. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. Photos of Julia and Dwayne together, screenshots of their text messages when she left her phone unlocked, a record of every lie she told about where she was going and when she'd be back. The most damaging evidence came from Julia's own mouth. She and Megan met for coffee every Thursday at the Starbucks near Julia's office. I started showing up early, taking a corner table with my laptop, looking like any other remote worker. "I can't believe how good he is," Julia told Megan during their second Thursday coffee date I overheard. "Like, Tom and I haven't been intimate in months, and Dwayne makes me feel alive again." "Are you going to tell Tom?" Megan asked. "Eventually. But right now, with Danny staying with us, and Tom being so stressed about money, it doesn't seem like the right time." "What about Dwayne's wife?" "Tasha. She works double shifts at the hospital. She barely notices when he's gone." "This is messy, Jules." "I know, but I haven't felt this way in years. Tom and I are more like roommates now. We split bills and chores, but there's no passion, no excitement. Maybe you should try couples counseling." "With what money? Tom's business is barely breaking even, and we're supporting Danny. At least Dwayne makes me laugh." I closed my laptop and left before I heard more. I'd gathered enough data. Time to analyze the situation. Julia was cheating because she felt neglected and unappreciated. Danny was a financial and emotional drain who was making everything worse. My friends, the few couple friends we had, would probably side with Julia because she was more social and likable. I was about to lose my wife, my house, and half my assets to a woman who was screwing her personal trainer because I didn't make her laugh anymore. That's when I decided to implement my solution. The first phase was isolating the problem. I couldn't deal with Julia's affair while Danny was in the house, eating my food and wearing my clothes, and generally making everything more complicated. So I dealt with Danny first. "We need to talk," I told him the next Monday morning after Julia left for her early workout. "What's up?" he asked, not looking away from the TV. "You've been here 6 months. Time flies when you're having fun." "Danny, look at me." He finally turned away from some morning talk show where people were screaming at each other about paternity tests. "Yeah? I want you out by Friday." "What? Why?" "Because this was supposed to be temporary and you've made it permanent. Because you don't contribute anything except dirty dishes and attitude. Because my marriage is falling apart and having you here makes everything worse." Danny stood up, and for a second I thought he might actually swing at me. Instead, he laughed. "You can't kick me out. Julia invited me. Julia doesn't pay the mortgage. I do. We'll see what she says about this. I already know what she'll say. She'll defend you because that's what she does. She'll make me the bad guy for being unreasonable. She'll guilt me about family loyalty and Christian charity and how we should help people when they're down." Danny's smirk faded a little. So I don't care anymore. You're out Friday. Find somewhere else to go." "And if I don't?" "Then Saturday morning, I'm changing the locks and putting your stuff on the curb. Your choice whether you want to be here for that or not." That afternoon, Julia came home early and went straight to the kitchen where I was working on my laptop. "Danny says you want him to leave." "Danny's right. Tom, he's family. He's going through a hard time." "Julia, sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want to understand why you're being so cruel to someone who needs our help." I closed my laptop and looked at my wife. Really looked at her. When we'd met 8 years ago, she'd been a junior HR coordinator with big dreams and bigger student loans. I'd been a senior systems analyst with a stable income and a 5-year plan. We'd made sense together. We'd been a team. Now she was an HR director with a gym membership and a personal trainer who made her feel alive. I was still a systems analyst, but now I worked for myself and made less money with more stress. "Julia, when's the last time we had dinner together? Just us, no TV, no phones, no Danny?" She thought about it. "I don't know, a few weeks ago." "Try 3 months. When's the last time we talked about something that wasn't logistics? Bills, schedules, Danny's problems, work stress? We talk all the time. We coordinate. We don't talk. When's the last time you asked me how I'm doing? Not how work is going or whether I paid the electric bill, but how I'm actually doing." Julia sat down at the kitchen table, and I could see her trying to remember. The fact that she had to try told me everything I needed to know. "We've been busy," she said finally. "You've been busy. I've been working and paying bills and trying to keep everything together while you work out with Dwayne and Danny eats our food." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired, Julia. I'm tired of being the only adult in this house. I'm tired of being taken for granted. I'm tired of feeling like a paycheck with legs." "That's not fair. Isn't it? When's the last time you thanked me for anything? When's the last time you showed any appreciation for the fact that I work 60 hours a week so you can afford your gym membership and Danny can afford to be unemployed?" Julia's face was getting red, which meant she was getting angry. Good. Angry was honest. "I work too, Tom. I contribute to this household." "You do. You absolutely do. But you also spend $350 at the Riverside Hotel for work meetings that don't exist." The color drained out of her face. "What?" "Tuesday, October 15th, 3:50 at the Riverside, same night you worked late on quarterly reports." "I can explain that." "I'm sure you can. Just like you can explain why your personal trainer sends you text messages with fire emojis. Just like you can explain why you and Megan talk about how good Dwayne is in bed during your Thursday coffee dates." Julia stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You've been following me?" "I've been paying attention. There's a difference. You're spying on me. I'm observing my wife acting like a stranger and trying to figure out when everything went wrong." Julia stood up and started pacing around the kitchen. "This is crazy. You're being paranoid and controlling and Danny's still leaving Friday." She stopped pacing. "What does Danny have to do with any of this?" Danny's a symptom of the bigger problem. You make decisions without consulting me, then expect me to deal with the consequences. You invited him to stay without asking how I felt about it. You extended his visit over and over without considering the impact on our marriage or our finances. You defend him when he's disrespectful to me in my own house. He's family. So am I, or at least I used to be. That night, Julia slept in the guest room. Danny avoided me completely, probably hoping I'd forget about Friday if he stayed out of sight. But I'd moved past, hoping things would get better on their own. Thursday morning, I called in sick and drove to the gym where Dwayne worked. It was one of those boutique fitness places with exposed brick walls and motivational quotes painted in cursive fonts. The kind of place where people paid premium prices to sweat in attractive surroundings. I bought a day pass and spent an hour observing. Dwayne was everything I wasn't. Tall, muscular, confident, and charming. He flirted with all his female clients, but he was more focused with Julia, more intimate. They had inside jokes and shared looks and the kind of casual physical contact that meant they'd been casual in private. I also noticed that Dwayne wore a wedding ring, which he conveniently forgot to mention during his flirtation sessions. After my workout, I approached him at the front desk. "Excuse me, are you Dwayne?" "That's me, brother. You looking to train?" "Actually, I'm Tom Kessler, Julia's husband." The change in his expression was immediate and satisfying. Confidence became caution. Charm became calculation. "Oh, hey, man, Julia's great, really dedicated to her fitness goals." "I'm sure she is." "Listen, I wanted to thank you for all the personal attention you've been giving her. The private sessions, the motivation, the extra encouragement. It means a lot." Dwayne relaxed slightly. "Just doing my job." "Of course. Though I have to ask, do you give all your married clients your personal phone number? The fire emoji texts are really motivating." Now he looked uncomfortable. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. But don't worry. I'm not here to cause problems. I just wanted to meet the man who's been making my wife so happy." I left him standing at the front desk, probably wondering how much I knew and what I planned to do about it. Friday came, and Danny was still in my house. "I'm not leaving," he announced at breakfast. "Julia says I can stay as long as I need to." Julia doesn't make that decision alone. She does when her husband's being an unreasonable a-hole. I finished my coffee and went to my laptop. "Okay." "Okay, what?" "Okay, you can stay." Danny looked suspicious. "Really?" "Really. But I want you to understand something. This house is in my name only. The utilities are in my name. The internet you use to stream Netflix all day is in my name. The car insurance that covers you when you borrow Julia's car is in my name. So if you're going to live here permanently, you need to start contributing permanently. I want $300 a month for rent, plus half the utilities, plus your own car insurance, plus your own food." Danny laughed. "I don't have that kind of money." "Then get a job. The job market is tough right now. McDonald's is hiring, so is Walmart, so is every restaurant and retail store in town. You don't want a job, Danny. You want to live for free and have someone else pay your bills. That's not true. Prove it. Get a job by Monday or start packing Tuesday." That weekend, Julia and I barely spoke. She was angry about my ultimatum with Danny, and I was tired of pretending everything was normal. Saturday night, she went out with Megan and didn't come home until after midnight. Sunday, she spent the day at the gym and came back exhausted but glowing. Monday morning, Danny announced he'd gotten a job at a warehouse across town. Part-time, minimum wage, but it was something. "See?" Julia said. "All he needed was motivation. We'll see how long it lasts." It lasted 2 weeks. Danny quit because the work was too hard and the supervisor was mean and the hours interfered with his social life. By then, I'd moved on to phase 2 of my solution. I'd been documenting Julia's affair for a month, and I had enough evidence to prove infidelity in a divorce proceeding. But divorce was expensive, messy, and public. It would cost me half of everything I'd worked for and turn me into the bitter ex-husband who couldn't keep his wife happy. I wanted something more elegant. Something that would give me the satisfaction of justice without the complications of legal proceedings. That's when I decided to let Julia's affair destroy itself. The key was Tasha Harper, Dwayne's wife. She was a nurse at Chicago General, working double shifts to pay for the house and cars and lifestyle that Dwayne's personal training income couldn't support. She was also, according to my research, completely unaware that her husband was cheating. I could have sent her the photos and screenshots I'd collected, But that would have been too obvious. Instead, I decided to let her discover the truth naturally, with just a little help. I created a fake social media account and started following both Dwayne and Julia online. Then I began liking and commenting on their posts in ways that highlighted their connection. When Julia posted a photo from the gym, I'd comment, "Great workout. Dwayne's training is really paying off." When Dwayne posted motivational quotes, I'd tag Julia and add, "This is so true. Thanks for sharing this wisdom." I also started showing up at places where I knew they'd be together. The coffee shop near the gym, the restaurant where they had lunch after their sessions, the park where they met for their evening runs. I never approached them or made a scene. I just made sure they saw me, made sure they knew I was watching. The pressure started getting to both of them. Julia became more defensive about her schedule and more secretive about her phone. Dwayne started looking over his shoulder and cutting their public appearances short. But the real breakthrough came when I overheard Julia talking to Megan at their Thursday coffee date. "Tom's acting really weird," Julia said. "He keeps showing up places and he's asking all these questions about my schedule." "Maybe he knows," Megan suggested. "He can't know. We've been careful." "Have you? Because Dwayne's been posting a lot of photos from your workouts and you're in most of them." "Those are just fitness posts." "Julia, you're wearing matching workout outfits in half of them, and there's this weird guy who keeps commenting on all your posts together." "What weird guy?" Megan showed her the phone. "This guy, Chicago fitness fan. He seems to know both of you pretty well." I watched Julia's face change as she scrolled through the comments I'd been leaving. She was starting to understand that someone was paying attention to her relationship with Dwayne, someone who knew more than they should. "I need to talk to Dwayne," she said. "Maybe you need to talk to Tom." "And say what? That I've been having an affair because our marriage is dead and he's more interested in his computer than his wife? Is that really how you feel?" Julia was quiet for a long time. "I don't know how I feel anymore. I know I'm happier when I'm with Dwayne. I know Tom and I haven't been intimate in months. I know I'm tired of feeling like his employee instead of his wife. So get counseling or get divorced, but this sneaking around is going to blow up eventually. I know, I just need more time to figure out what I want. But time was something I wasn't planning to give her." That evening, I had dinner with Ray at Murphy's Tavern. I filled him in on everything I'd discovered and everything I'd been doing. "You're playing with fire, Tommy," he warned. "This could backfire badly." "How?" "Julia finds out you've been stalking her and Dwayne. She's got grounds for a restraining order. Dwayne's wife finds out you've been manipulating her. She could cause problems. You're walking a very thin line between justice and harassment." "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. By creating fake social media accounts and following them around town. By documenting what's already happening and making sure it has consequences." Ray poured himself a shot of whiskey and downed it. "Tom, I've been married 3 times. You know what I learned from all those divorces?" "What?" "Sometimes the best revenge is just walking away. Take your dignity, take your self-respect, and find someone who appreciates what you have to offer." "That's not revenge. That's giving up." "No, that's growing up. Revenge is what people do when they're too hurt to think clearly." But I was thinking clearly. Maybe for the first time in months. The next phase of my plan required patience and perfect timing. I needed Julia and Dwayne to make a mistake big enough that Tasha would discover the affair naturally, without any obvious intervention from me. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. The following Tuesday, Julia told me she was working late on a presentation for the executive team. It was the same lie she'd used for the Riverside Hotel incident, which meant she was meeting Dwayne somewhere private. Instead of following them, I decided to visit Tasha at the hospital. Chicago General was a massive complex of buildings, connected by covered walkways and underground tunnels. I found Tasha in the cardiac ICU where she was working a double shift covering for a sick colleague. "Excuse me, are you Tasha Harper?" She looked up from a chart she was reviewing. Tasha was smaller than I'd expected, with tired eyes and the kind of efficient movements that came from years of hospital work. "Yes, can I help you?" "I'm Tom Kessler. My wife Julia trains with your husband." "Oh, right. Dwayne mentions Julia sometimes. She's very dedicated." "She is. Actually, I wanted to thank you for being so understanding about their schedule. I know Dwayne works with Julia pretty late sometimes, and that must be hard when you're working double shifts." Tasha's expression changed slightly. Late? Dwayne's usually home by 7 unless he's got an evening class. Really? Julia doesn't usually get home from training until 9 or 10. Maybe she goes somewhere else after training, gets dinner, or runs errands. Maybe. Although last Tuesday she said she was working late, but her car wasn't at her office. I drove by around 8 to see if she wanted me to bring her dinner. Now Tasha was paying full attention. Where was her car? I never found it. She said the presentation ran longer than expected and she grabbed dinner with colleagues, but when I asked which restaurant, she couldn't remember the name. That's odd. Probably nothing. Marriage makes you paranoid sometimes, you know? You start reading meaning into everything. I understand. Dwayne's been distracted lately, too. Working longer hours, getting more texts from clients. I keep telling myself it's just business growth. I'm sure that's all it is. Well, I should let you get back to work. Thanks for taking such good care of people. I left Tasha with questions she hadn't had before, and doubts that would make her pay closer attention to her husband's schedule. 2 days later, the situation exploded naturally. Julia came home Thursday evening looking shaken and angry. She went straight to the bedroom and slammed the door. When I knocked and asked what was wrong, she told me to leave her alone. An hour later, she came out and sat at the kitchen table where I was working. Dwayne's wife confronted me at the gym today. I looked up from my laptop. About what? She thinks we're having an affair. Are you? Julia stared at me like I'd slapped her. What kind of question is that? An honest one. Are you having an affair with Dwayne? I can't believe you'd ask me that. I can't believe you won't answer. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Julia spoke. Yes. The word hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that had been burning for months. How long? I asked. 3 months? Why? Because I was lonely. Because you work all the time and when you're home, you're either stressed about money or annoyed with Danny or buried in your computer. Because I felt invisible in my own marriage. So you decided to fix that by sleeping with your personal trainer? I decided to fix that by finding someone who made me feel attractive and interesting and alive, while staying married to me. I was going to tell you. When? When I figured out what I wanted. I closed my laptop and really looked at my wife. She was crying, but she also looked relieved, like she'd been carrying a weight and finally put it down. What do you want, Julia? I don't know. I love Dwayne, but he's married too, and his wife is pregnant. This was news to me. Tasha's pregnant? She just found out. Dwayne told me yesterday. He says he can't leave her now, especially with the baby coming. So where does that leave you? Alone. I can't stay with Dwayne, and I don't think I can stay with you. Because every time I look at you, I'll remember how unhappy I was. And every time you look at me, you'll remember that I cheated. She was right about that. What about Danny? I asked. What about him? If we're getting divorced, he can't stay here. Tom, he's my brother. He needs help. He needs a job and his own apartment. I'm not going to support your unemployed brother while you're living with someone else. I'm not living with anyone else. Dwayne and I are over. But we're over too. Julia nodded. I think so. That night, she slept in the guest room again. The next morning, she started looking for her own apartment. But Danny had other ideas. You can't kick Julia out, he told me Saturday morning. This is her house too. Actually, it's not. The deed is in my name only. Julia never contributed to the down payment or the mortgage payments. That's not fair. Fair would have been Julia not cheating on me with her personal trainer. She cheated because you're a lousy husband. I looked at Danny. Really looked at him. He was wearing my Northwestern shirt again, sitting at my kitchen table, eating cereal I'd paid for in a house where he'd been living rent-free for 7 months. Danny, you have until Sunday to find somewhere else to go. I'm not leaving my sister. Your sister is leaving me. She can take you with her. We'll see about that. Sunday came and went. Danny was still in my house Monday morning when I got up for work. So I called a locksmith and had him change all the locks while Danny was out job hunting, or whatever he did when he left the house for a few hours each day. When Danny came back that evening, his key didn't work. He stood on my front porch pounding on the door and shouting about his rights and his belongings. I opened the door with the chain lock still attached. Your stuff is in the garage. You can pick it up any time, but you can't come back in the house. This is illegal? You can't just throw someone out without notice? Actually, I can. You're not a tenant, Danny. You're a guest who overstayed his welcome. Guests don't have tenant rights. Julia will hear about this. I'm sure she will. Julia called me an hour later, screaming about how cruel and vindictive I was being. I let her vent for 5 minutes, then asked where Danny was going to live. He'll stay with me until he gets back on his feet. Good. That's what family does. Don't be sarcastic, Tom. I'm not being sarcastic, I'm being honest. Danny is your responsibility, not mine. He always was. Julia hung up on me. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and paperwork and dividing up 8 years of shared possessions. Julia found a 2-bedroom apartment across town so Danny could stay with her. I kept the house, the cars, and most of the furniture. She kept her retirement account, half our savings, and the responsibility for her brother. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in February. We met at the courthouse, signed the papers, and walked out of each other's lives with a minimum of drama and a maximum of relief. But that wasn't the end of the story. 3 months after the divorce, I got a call from Ray. Tommy, you need to come down to the bar. There's something you should see. When I arrived at Murphy's Tavern, Ray pointed to a corner booth where Danny was holding court with a group of our mutual friends, people who had been Julia's and my couple friends during our marriage. He's been here every night for a week, Ray said, telling anyone who will listen about how you destroyed Julia's life and kicked him out for no reason. I listened to Danny's version of events for a few minutes. According to him, I was a controlling, paranoid husband who couldn't handle Julia's success and independence. I was jealous of her friendship with Dwayne and used Danny as a scapegoat for my own insecurities. I had forced Julia out of her own home and left her brother homeless out of spite. He's really selling it, Ray observed. Half these people think you're the villain in this story. What do you think I should do about it? Depends. Do you care what these people think? I looked around the bar at the faces of people I'd considered friends, people who had been to my house for barbecues and game nights, people who had celebrated my marriage and were now listening to Danny trash my character without asking for my side of the story. You know what, Ray? I really don't. But Danny wasn't finished with me. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my biggest client, a law firm that provided 60% of my annual income. Tom, we need to talk, said Margaret Chen, the managing partner. There have been some concerns raised about your reliability and professionalism. We met at her office the next day. Margaret was direct and businesslike, the way she'd always been. Someone contacted us with allegations that you've been using our confidential data for personal vendettas. They claim you've been stalking your ex-wife and her boyfriend, using information from our background check database. Who made these allegations? I can't reveal that, but they seem to know specific details about your recent divorce and your access to our systems. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. It was Danny Hartwell, wasn't it? My ex-brother-in-law? Margaret's expression didn't change, but she didn't deny it either. The allegations are false, I continued. I've never used your data for personal purposes, and I've never stalked anyone. I can provide documentation of every query I've run on your systems, and you can verify that all of them were for legitimate business purposes. We'll need to conduct a full audit of your access logs. Of course. But Margaret, you should know that Danny Hartwell has been spreading false stories about me around town since my divorce. He's unemployed, living with my ex-wife, and apparently has decided that destroying my reputation will somehow improve his situation. Why would he target your business relationships? Because he knows that losing your account would devastate my income. It's not about justice or truth. It's about revenge. The audit took 2 weeks and cost me $3,000 in legal fees, but it cleared me completely. Margaret apologized for the investigation and assured me that our business relationship was solid, but the damage was done. Word had gotten around the legal community that I was under investigation for misuse of confidential data. 3 smaller clients canceled their contracts, and 2 potential new clients decided to go with other providers. Danny had cost me about $20,000 in lost income, and he'd done it by lying to people who trusted him to tell the truth. That's when I decided it was time for phase 3 of my solution. I'd been patient with Danny. I'd given him chances to get his life together, opportunities to contribute something positive, and the benefit of the doubt when he made mistakes. But Danny had made it clear that he wasn't interested in improving his situation. He was interested in making mine worse. So I stopped being patient. The first thing I did was research Danny's background more thoroughly than I'd ever bothered to do while he was living in my house. What I found was a pattern of behavior that went back years. Danny had been fired from his last 3 jobs for attendance problems and attitude issues. He'd been evicted from 2 apartments for non-payment of rent. He'd defaulted on a car loan, a credit card, and a personal loan from a payday lender. He'd been arrested twice for drunk and disorderly conduct, and once for driving under the influence. More importantly, he'd been collecting unemployment benefits while doing occasional cash work for a construction company, which was fraud. I documented everything and sent it to the Illinois Department of Employment Security with a detailed report of Danny's unreported income. Within a month, Danny received a notice that his unemployment benefits were being terminated and that he owed the state $4,000 in improperly collected payments. But that was just the beginning. I also discovered that Danny had been using Julia's address to receive mail for various financial schemes. He'd applied for credit cards using her address and his name, opened bank accounts with her address as his permanent residence, and even registered to vote in her district. None of this was necessarily illegal, but it created a paper trail that connected Julia to Danny's financial problems. When Danny defaulted on his new credit cards, which he did within 3 months, the collection agencies started calling Julia's apartment and sending letters to her address. Julia called me in a panic. "Tom, there are people calling me about Danny's debts. They say he owes money to credit card companies, and they want me to pay it. Are you legally responsible for his debts?" "I don't think so, but they're very aggressive. They call at all hours and they've threatened to garnish my wages." "That's harassment. You should report them." "I tried, but they say Danny gave them my information as a reference and they have the right to contact me." "Did Danny ask your permission to use you as a reference?" "He asked if he could use my address for mail. I didn't know he was applying for credit cards." "Julia, you need to make Danny find his own place. As long as he's living with you, you're going to be connected to his financial problems. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. That's not your problem anymore, it's his." But Julia couldn't bring herself to kick Danny out, even when his problems became her problems. She was too loyal, too guilty, and too afraid of what people would think if she abandoned her brother. So, I helped her make the decision. I hired a private investigator to document Danny's daily activities. What we discovered was that Danny wasn't just unemployed and financially irresponsible. He was also dealing pills. Nothing major, just selling marijuana and prescription pills to friends and acquaintances. But it was enough to get him arrested, and it was happening in Julia's apartment. I could have turned the evidence over to the police, but that would have implicated Julia as well. Instead, I used it as leverage. I had the private investigator approach Danny directly. "Mr. Hartwell, my name is Mike Johnson, and I'm a private investigator. I've been hired to document your activities for the past month." Danny was sitting in his car, outside a McDonald's, where he'd just sold Adderall to a college student. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about the fact that you've been selling controlled substances without a license, which is a felony in Illinois. I have photos, video, and audio recordings of multiple transactions." Danny's face went white. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand that your current lifestyle is unsustainable. You're putting your sister at risk, you're breaking federal and state laws, and you're creating problems for people who've tried to help you." "Who hired you?" "Someone who's tired of watching you destroy other people's lives while refusing to take responsibility for your own." Mike handed Danny a manila envelope. "Inside, you'll find copies of all the evidence I've collected, along with a detailed report of your illegal activities. You have 48 hours to move out of your sister's apartment and find legitimate employment. If you don't, this evidence goes to the Chicago Police Department and the Illinois Department of Revenue." "This is blackmail?" "No, this is consequences. You've been avoiding them for years, but they finally caught up with you." Danny opened the envelope and looked at the photos. His hands were shaking. "What if I can't find a job in 48 hours? "Then you better start looking 48 hours ago." Mike walked away, leaving Danny sitting in his car with evidence of his own criminal behavior. That evening, Julia called me crying. "Danny says he has to move out immediately. He won't tell me why, but he's packing all his stuff and he seems scared. Maybe he finally realized he needs to take responsibility for his own life." "Tom, did you have something to do with this? Why would you think that?" "Because Danny says a private investigator approached him today with photos and threats." "Julia, I'm not responsible for Danny's problems. If a private investigator was following him, it's because someone had reason to believe he was doing something wrong." "What kind of something wrong?" "I don't know. Why don't you ask Danny?" But Danny wasn't talking. He packed his belongings that night and moved into a weekly rate motel across town. Within a week, he'd found a job at a warehouse, the same kind of job he'd quit when he was living with me, but now he didn't have a choice. Julia was angry with me for weeks, convinced that I'd orchestrated Danny's sudden departure. but she was also relieved to have her apartment to herself and her phone calls free from debt collectors. "I don't know whether to thank you or hate you," she told me when we met to sign the final divorce papers. "You don't have to do either," I replied. "You just have to live your own life instead of living Danny's life for him." "He's family, Tom." "So were you, but that didn't stop you from choosing Dwayne over our marriage." Julia was quiet for a moment. "How is Dwayne, by the way?" "I wouldn't know." "Why?" "His wife left him after the baby was born, took the kid and moved back with her parents. I heard he's working at a different gym now." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you really?" I thought about it. "Yeah, actually I am. I'm not sorry he lost you, but I'm sorry his kid is going to grow up in a broken home. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd tried counseling instead of giving up?" "Do you?" "Sometimes. But then I remember how unhappy we both were, and I think maybe this was inevitable. Maybe it was." We signed the papers and shook hands like business partners closing a deal, which in a way we were. 6 months later, I ran into Tasha Harper at a coffee shop downtown. She was pushing a stroller with a beautiful baby girl inside. "Tom, right? Julia's ex-husband?" "That's me. Congratulations on the baby. She's gorgeous." "Thank you. Her name's Emma." "How are you doing? I heard about the divorce." Tasha's expression hardened. "I'm doing fine. Better than fine, actually. Turns out Dwayne was cheating with more than just your wife." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm better off without him. Emma and I both are." "What's he doing now?" "Last I heard, he was working at some chain gym in the suburbs, living in a studio apartment, paying child support, and posting motivational quotes on Instagram about overcoming adversity." Ironic. That's one word for it. We talked for a few more minutes about work and life and the strange ways that people's paths intersect and diverge. As I was leaving, Tasha called after me. "Tom, that day you came to the hospital to talk to me about Julia and Dwayne's schedule?" "Yeah?" "I knew what you were doing. I just wanted you to know that I appreciated it. You could have sent me photos or made a big scene, but instead you just gave me the information I needed to figure things out myself. Everyone deserves the truth. They do, but not everyone deserves it delivered with kindness." I walked away thinking about the difference between revenge and justice, between punishment and consequences, between getting even and getting better. A year after the divorce, I was doing better than I had in years. My business had recovered from Danny's sabotage attempt and was actually growing. I'd started dating a woman named Sarah who was a teacher at the local elementary school. She was kind, funny, and refreshingly direct about what she wanted from life. I'd also started volunteering at a financial literacy program for people recovering from substance use challenges and unemployment. It was satisfying work, helping people learn to budget and save and plan for the future instead of just surviving day to day. One evening, I was leaving the community center where I taught the classes when I saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench outside. Danny. He looked different, thinner, cleaner, more alert. He was wearing work clothes that were dirty but not torn, and he had a lunchbox beside him. "Tom." "Danny." We looked at each other for a moment, two men who had shared a house and a family and a mutual dislike for several months. "I heard you volunteer here," he said. "Sometimes. You?" "I'm in the program. Recovery support, job training, financial planning, the whole thing." "How's it going?" "Better than I expected. Harder than I hoped." Danny stood up and faced me directly. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For everything. For taking advantage of your hospitality, for disrespecting you in your own home, for trying to sabotage your business after the divorce, for being a selfish, entitled a-hole who blamed everyone else for my problems." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but Danny looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely changed. "What happened?" I asked. "I hit bottom, lost the motel room, got arrested for possession, spent 30 days in county jail. Julia bailed me out, but she told me it was the last time. Said I could get help or I could stay gone, but she was done enabling me." "And you chose help." "I chose to stop choosing pills and alcohol over everything else in my life. The help was just the first step." We walked toward the parking lot together. Danny's car was an old Honda with a dented bumper and a cracked windshield, but it was clean and running. "Tom, I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but I want you to know that I understand what you did." "What do you mean?" "The private investigator, the unemployment fraud report, all of it. You could have just called the cops and had me arrested. Instead, you gave me a chance to make a different choice. I gave you consequences for your actions. What you did with those consequences was up to you. That's what I mean. You didn't destroy me, even though I tried to destroy you. You just made it impossible for me to keep destroying myself without facing the results. Danny got in his car and rolled down the window. For what it's worth, Julia knows she made a mistake with the divorce. Not about Dwayne, she knows that was wrong, but about how she handled things with you. She says you were a better husband than she was a wife. Julia and I both made mistakes. We just made different ones. Maybe, but you learned from yours. Danny drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot thinking about second chances and personal responsibility and the long, difficult process of becoming a better person. 2 years later, I married Sarah in a small ceremony at the community center where we'd met. Julia sent a card wishing us happiness. Danny sent a card, too, along with a photo of himself in a supervisor's uniform at the warehouse where he'd been promoted to management. Dwayne sent nothing, which was probably for the best. The last I heard, he was working at a gym in Florida, still posting motivational quotes on social media, still looking for someone else to blame for the consequences of his choices. Some people learn from their mistakes. Others just move to Florida and pretend they never made any. As for me, I learned that the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. It's building a life so good that you forget why you wanted revenge in the first place. But sometimes, late at night when Sarah is asleep beside me and the house is quiet, I think about that day I found Julia and Dwayne in my garage. I think about Danny eating my food and wearing my clothes and calling me unreasonable. I think about the friends who believed Danny's lies and the clients who questioned my integrity. And I smile, because they all got exactly what they deserved. And I got exactly what I wanted. Justice served cold, with a side of personal growth and a happy ending that nobody saw coming. Not even me.